Dr. Jason Wells adjusted his collar one final time before entering the crystalline chamber. At the heart of the intercultural exchange dome, 3 weeks of tense negotiations had led to this moment, the first formal cultural exchange between humanity and the Valeri Republic. The walls around him pulsed with a soft blue luminescence that reminded him of deep ocean waters, while geometric patterns etched into the crystal caught and refracted the light into mesmerizing displays. Dr. Wells, came a melodious voice from across the chamber. Ambassador Kithra glided forward, her pale blue skin seeming to glow in the chamber's ethereal light. Golden curls framed her angular face, and her amber eyes held an intelligence that had impressed him throughout their preliminary meetings. Behind her, 3 other Valeri stood in formation to guards and what appeared to be a scholar. Ambassador Jason nodded respectfully. I appreciate you inviting me to participate in this purification ritual. I have to admit, the translation protocols weren't entirely clear about what it involves. Kithra's lips curved into what he'd learned was the Valeri equivalent of a gentle smile. It is a sacred tradition, Dr. Wells, one of cleansing and openness between those who would share knowledge and space. We ask that you approach with reverence for both our customs and the significance of this moment. Guard Captain Valessa, a tall warrior with intricate scarification along her arms, stepped forward. The ritual requires complete honesty and vulnerability. Human, you must shed all pretense and artifice. Jason nodded, thinking he understood. After years of working in sterile laboratory environments and decontamination chambers, he assumed this was some kind of advanced cleaning procedure, perhaps involving energy fields or chemical baths that required minimal clothing. Of course, I've been through similar protocols before. First contact with new ecosystems requires proper preparation. Scholar Thesan, the youngest of the group with bright copper hair, activated a recording device. We shall document this exchange for future cultural analysis. Shall we begin? Kithra gestured to the center of the chamber, where a circle of glowing crystals had been arranged on the floor. Jason stepped into the circle and began the process he'd done hundreds of times before, efficiently removing his outer uniform jacket and placing it neatly aside. He loosened his tie and began unbuttoning his shirt, his movements practiced and clinical. The change in the chamber's atmosphere was immediate and electric. The recording device clattered to the crystalline floor. Valessa's hand instinctively moved to the ceremonial blade at her side before freezing mid-motion. Several other Valeri who had been observing from alcoves around the chamber gasped audibly. But it was Kithra's reaction that made Jason pause. With his shirt halfway off, the ambassador's amber eyes had gone wide, her pupils dilated. A flush of deeper blue spread across her cheeks and down her neck, something he'd never seen in a Valeri before. Dr. Wells, she whispered, her voice barely audible. What are you doing? Jason looked around the chamber, suddenly aware that something had gone terribly wrong. The crystalline walls seemed to pulse faster, responding to the elevated emotional state of their occupants. I'm preparing for the ritual, removing potential contaminants as requested by the ancient codes, Valessa breathed, her scarred hands still hovering near her weapon. He reveals himself as if it were nothing. Thesan had recovered her device, but held it with trembling hands. In 300 cycles of life, I have never witnessed such audacity. Kithra stepped closer, her movements careful and deliberate. Jason could see her struggling with some internal conflict, her scientific curiosity warring with what was clearly cultural shock. Dr. Wells, she said softly, do you understand what you have just done? Apparently not, Jason replied, keeping his shirt partially open but making no further moves. Could you help me understand what's happening here? The ambassador's gaze swept over his exposed chest. The first time any Valeri had seen human anatomy outside of medical holographs. Her voice was barely steady when she spoke. Among my people, the physical form is sacred. We do not reveal ourselves to others, only to bonded pairs, to family, to those with whom we share the deepest intimacy. Jason felt heat rise in his own cheeks as understanding dawned. Oh no. You've just exposed yourself to our ambassador as if she were your life mate, Valessa finished, though her tone held more wonder than anger. But instead of demanding he leave or calling for sanctions, Kithra did something that surprised everyone in the chamber. Including herself, she stepped even closer, close enough that Jason could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "Tell me, Dr. Wells," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of scientific fascination and something deeper, more personal. "How is it that your species approaches physical form with such ease, such lack of shame or reservation?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with implications neither fully understood yet. Around them, the crystal walls pulsed, with anticipation, as if the dome itself sensed that this moment of cultural collision might become something far more significant than anyone had planned. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, electric with possibility and misunderstanding. Jason's heart hammered against his ribs as he watched the play of emotions across Kithra's face. Shock, curiosity, and something that looked almost like hunger for knowledge. "Your question deserves an honest answer, Ambassador," Jason said carefully, his shirt still hanging open. "For humans, the physical body is functional. In scientific and medical contexts, we view it as a biological system to be studied and understood. There's no inherent shame in anatomical reality." Kithra's amber eyes tracked the movement of his chest as he breathed, clearly fascinated by the differences in human physiology. "You speak of it as if it were merely machinery." "Not merely," Jason corrected, noting how her pupils dilated when he shifted slightly. "But we don't attach the same cultural significance to exposure that you do. In medical school, we study cadavers. In research, we document physical responses. The body is a tool for living, not a sacred mystery." Thisan stepped closer, her recording forgotten. "But surely you must have innate customs ways of showing trust and vulnerability?" Jason found himself studying the young scholar's expression, the same mixture of scientific fascination and cultural shock he'd seen in Kithra. "We do, but they're more about emotional openness than physical concealment. We might share our fears, our failures, our deepest thoughts before we share our bodies." "Fascinating," Valessa murmured, her hand finally dropping from her weapon. "You reveal the physical form as easily as breathing, yet guard your emotional truths." "The opposite of our ways," Kithra added softly, her voice carrying an odd note. "We may speak openly of our thoughts and feelings, but the physical form—" She gestured helplessly. Jason noticed how her gaze kept returning to his exposed chest, lingering on the differences in bone structure, muscle distribution, the scattering of hair across his skin. "May I ask you something, Ambassador? Given the circumstances, formality seems inadequate. Please, call me Kithra." "Kithra," he said, enjoying the way her name felt on his tongue. "What do you see when you look at me? What's different from Valeri males?" The question caused another ripple of shock. Through the chamber, Thisan actually gasped, while Valessa made a choking sound. But Kithra, after a moment's hesitation, stepped even closer. "Your bone structure is broader," she said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Valeri males are more delicate, more similar to our females in build. Your muscle definition is pronounced. We can see the individual groups beneath your skin." Her hand rose unconsciously, stopping just short of touching his shoulder. "And the hair patterns. Valeri have no body hair beyond their heads. Would you like to understand more about human anatomy?" Jason asked, surprised by his own boldness. For diplomatic purposes, of course, the offer hung between them, loaded with implications. Kithra's breathing had quickened, and Jason could see the pulse point at her throat fluttering rapidly. Around them, the crystal chamber seemed to respond to the tension, its blue glow deepening. Kithra started, then stopped. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. "Yes, for the sake of interspecies understanding." She extended her hands slowly, giving him every opportunity to refuse. When he didn't, her fingertips made contact with his shoulder, and both of them inhaled sharply. Her skin was cooler than human normal, smooth as silk, and the touch sent an unexpected jolt through Jason's nervous system. "Your skin is warmer than ours," she observed, her scientific training taking over even as her personal reactions threatened to overwhelm her. "And the texture rougher, but not unpleasantly so." Her touch moved to his collarbone. tracing the line of bone beneath skin with careful precision. The bone density appears greater than Valeri's standard. Is this typical for your species, human? Males generally have denser bone structure and more muscle mass than females, Jason explained, trying to keep his voice steady as her exploration continued. It's an evolutionary adaptation. Evolution, she breathed, her palm now resting flat against his chest, over his heart. The same forces that shaped us both, yet created such different results. The moment stretched between them, no longer purely scientific. Jason could feel the rapid flutter of her pulse, where her wrist pressed against his skin. Could see the way her amber eyes had darkened with something beyond curiosity. Kithra, he said softly. She looked up at him, and for a moment, the cultural barriers between them seemed as translucent as the crystal walls around them. Yes, in human culture, when we're trying to understand someone deeply, we often start with honesty about what we're feeling. He reached up slowly, covering her hand with his own. Right now, I'm feeling like this cultural exchange has become something neither of us expected. Her cheeks flushed that deeper blue again. Among my people, such honesty would typically come only after months of careful courtship. Yet with you, she paused, searching for words. I find myself wanting to understand everything about your species, about you. The council will need to know about this interaction, Valessa said quietly from behind them, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely disapproving. Yes, Kithra agreed, not moving away from Jason's touch. They will want to understand how human boldness affects our diplomatic protocols. Thesan, who had been recording again, looked up from her device. Ambassador, the readings from the chamber's emotional resonance crystals are unprecedented. Good or bad? Jason asked. Neither, Kithra replied, her thumb unconsciously stroking across his knuckles. Simply knew like everything about this encounter. She stepped back then, though her hand lingered in his for a moment longer than necessary. Dr. Wells, Jason, I believe we need to continue this cultural exchange in a more private setting. There are protocols to observe, reports to file, and questions to answer. He finished buttoning his shirt back up, though he noticed how her eyes followed the movement with what looked like regret. Many questions, perhaps. She said carefully, you would join me for the evening meal? There's much about human customs I find myself eager to understand. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Jason caught Thesan's quiet comment to Valessa. I don't think the ambassador has ever been this interested in xenobiology before. Valessa's response was equally soft, but carried clearly in the crystalline space. I don't think this is entirely about science anymore. Jason glanced at Kithra, who had obviously heard the exchange as well. The look she gave him held promise, curiosity, and something that transcended the boundaries between their species. A recognition that what had started as a misunderstanding might become something far more significant than either of them had anticipated. Kithra's private quarters were a revelation in themselves, nothing like the stark diplomatic spaces Jason had grown accustomed to during negotiations. Soft bioluminescent panels cast warm amber light across walls adorned with flowing Valeri art that seemed to move and shift when viewed peripherally. The furniture was organic in design, grown rather than built, with surfaces that adapted to their occupants' forms. This is beautiful, Jason said, running his fingers along a table that rippled slightly at his touch. It feels alive. It is, in a sense, Kithra replied, watching his wonder with obvious pleasure. Valeri architecture involves symbiotic relationships with crystalline organisms. They respond to our emotions, our needs. She paused, a faint smile playing at her lips. They seem quite fascinated by you, actually. I've never seen them react so actively to a non-Valeri presence. Indeed, Jason could see the subtle changes in the room's lighting. The way surfaces seemed to shift and adjust as he moved. What are they responding to? Curiosity, perhaps, or Kithra's cheeks took on that deeper blue hue again. Emotional resonance. They're very sensitive to attraction, to the biochemical markers of interest between potential mates. The word mates hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to address its implications directly. Instead, Kithra gestured to a seating area where what appeared to be dinner had been arranged. An array of foods in colors and textures unlike anything in human cuisine. I took the liberty of researching human dietary requirements, she said, indicating several dishes. These should be compatible with your biology. Though I confess I'm curious about your reactions to Valeri cuisine. As they settled onto the adaptive seating, Jason found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the way her golden curls caught the ambient light, the graceful movements of her hands as she served their meal. You mentioned that my boldness impressed your counsel. Kithra's laugh was like crystalline chimes. Impressed is one word for it. Shocked might be more accurate. But yes, they found your casual approach to physical exposure notable. Among Valeri, such audacity would indicate either insanity or extraordinary confidence. And which do they think I am, after reviewing the recordings and my initial report? She met his eyes directly. They believe you represent something entirely new, a species that approaches vulnerability from a completely different angle than our own. Jason tasted one of the dishes, a delicate flavor that seemed to change as he chewed, starting sweet and ending with a pleasant tingle. This is incredible. What is it? Essence bloom. It responds to the taster's biochemistry, adapting its flavor to complement their individual biology. Kithra watched his reaction carefully. The fact that it's adapting to you so readily is significant. How so? Essence bloom is traditionally shared between bonded pairs. It's said to enhance compatibility, to help partners understand each other on a fundamental level. Her voice grew softer. I've never seen it respond so positively to someone outside a mating bond. The implications of her words settled between them like a warm weight. Jason set down his utensil, studying her face. Kithra, can I ask you something that might be very personal after this afternoon? I think we've moved beyond conventional boundaries of personal and professional. What happens in Valeri courtship? How do your people connect? She was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes reflecting the room's shifting lights. It's a gradual process. We begin with intellectual compatibility, sharing thoughts, ideas, dreams. Then emotional intimacy develops over months or sometimes years. Physical closeness comes very slowly, first permitted touch of hands, then perhaps shoulders or arms. And beyond that, the blue flush spread from her cheeks down her neck. The reveal of physical form is sacred. It happens only when two souls have decided to bond permanently. The first time partners see each other unclothed is often the same night they join for life. Jason felt a weight settle in his chest. Then what I did today was unprecedented. She finished softly. You revealed yourself to me as if I were already your chosen mate, as if the barriers between us didn't exist. I'm sorry. I never meant to. Don't apologize. She reached across the small table, her fingers intertwining with his. What you did was shocking. Yes, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my life, I encountered someone who approached vulnerability without fear, without elaborate ritual or hesitation. Her thumb traced across his knuckles, and Jason felt that now familiar jolt of connection. May I tell you something that I haven't reported to the council? Of course. When you stood before me today, when you removed your garments without shame or ceremony, I felt something I've never experienced before. Not just curiosity, but desire, the wish to understand you not just intellectually, but physically, intimately. The room around them seemed to pulse with warmth, the bioluminescent panels responding to their elevated emotions. Jason squeezed her hand gently. In human culture, that kind of honesty is how we begin true intimacy, with emotional truth. Show me, she whispered. Show you what? How humans approach physical intimacy. Not the casual exposure from today, but the intentional kind. The kind that means something. Jason's heart rate doubled. Kithra, are you sure? I don't want to push beyond your cultural comfort zones. My culture has never encountered yours before, she replied, standing slowly and drawing him up with her. Perhaps it's time to discover what new traditions we might create together. She led him to another area of her quarters, where bioluminescent flowers cast dancing shadows on the walls. Her movements were careful, deliberate, as she began the slow process of removing her outer diplomatic robes, not with his casual efficiency from earlier, but with ceremonial grace. In Valeri tradition, this moment would be preceded by years of courtship. she said softly, letting the first layer of fabric fall away. But you've shown me that perhaps some barriers are meant to be crossed more boldly. Jason watched, mesmerized, as she revealed herself slowly, the elegant lines of her shoulders, the graceful curve of her neck, skin like polished moonstone. When she paused, looking suddenly uncertain, he stepped closer. In human tradition, he said gently, "We might start like this." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the delicate bone structure beneath her skin, with touch that means trust. When he leaned down to kiss her, she met him halfway, and the contact was electric literally. The room's responsive environment flared with brilliant light before settling into a warm, intimate glow. "The plants approve," she murmured against his lips. "What about you?" he asked. "I think," she said, her hands moving to explore the solid warmth of his chest, "that I'm beginning to understand why your species approaches intimacy with such boldness. There's something beautiful about honest desire." As they continued their careful exploration of each other, her wonder at his human warmth and strength, his fascination with her alien grace, and the way her skin seemed to glow from within, Jason realized that what had begun as a cultural misunderstanding was becoming something far more profound. A bridge between worlds, built from curiosity, desire, and the courage to be vulnerable in entirely new ways. The bioluminescent garden around them pulsed with soft harmonies, as if the very environment was celebrating their connection. In the distance, the crystalline dome sang its evening song, but here in this intimate space, there was only the sound of two hearts learning to beat in rhythm, two souls discovering that love could transcend the vast spaces between stars. Later, as they lay entwined among the responsive flowers that had dimmed to a gentle glow, Kithra traced patterns on his chest while the garden created a private aurora just for them. "I have something to tell you," she said quietly. "What?" "The council didn't just approve our cultural exchange continuation. They've asked me to establish a permanent human-Valeri relations post." She looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting the dancing lights above them. "They want you to be my co-director." Jason felt his world shift in the best possible way. "Are you asking me to stay permanently?" "I'm asking you to build a life with me," she said simply. "To help our peoples understand each other, to create something new from the best of both our worlds." His answer was wordless, but complete, expressed in the way he held her close while the bonding gardens sang their approval, in harmonies of light and sound that would echo in both their hearts for years to come. What had started as a simple misunderstanding about a purification ritual had become something neither of them could have imagined, proof that sometimes the most profound connections were forged in the space between one heartbeat and the next, when two brave souls chose to be vulnerable together under alien stars.